Hey guys, so this is the step-by-step installation guide that I've been meaning to do for a long time now. Finally got around to upgrading my other printer, and I went ahead and got the videos as I went along, so that I can share them with anybody that's looking to install their upgrade kit on their machines. So I have an F400 here that I'm planning on upgrading, and it is all stock right now. So you can see I've got all the original stepper brackets, carriages, and the tensioners and all that. It was in pretty good condition when I got it. It still is in pretty good condition, and I wasn't planning on converting it over because I was using this printer mainly as like a reference printer to compare to an upgraded printer. But so I've got my other one going over here. This one's all upgraded, and so the problem I'm running into is I got another product that I use these printers for, that I produce and sell, that's unrelated to the 3D printing stuff. So I'm having I've got my one upgraded one over here, and then I've got the other one here, and the quality is not the same. So I am going to go ahead and take this whole thing apart and upgrade it, and so that I can have all my printers. I got another one over here I need to do. That's an F410. That one's partially upgraded. So I want to get all three of my printers on the same page so that I can use either one and expect the same dimensions, the same quality, the same G code. I'm trying to get so I don't have to have special G code for each printer, basically. So that's the reason behind it. But anyway, yeah, this is the first of the series, the step-by-step installation guide for the 3D printer, the Fusion 3D printer upgrade kits. So basically what I'm going to be doing is disassembling the old hardware. So I've got the stepper brackets. I'm going to be taking those off. The carriage plates, or the brackets on either side of the Y-axis here, and then the cross member will be loose. Take the X carriage plate off, and then I've got the tensioners in the back there. Those will also be coming off, and there's just a few parts in that original kit that we're going to be saving, and those are the spacers that the idlers have right here in the back. So there's 4 on each side, and we're going to be saving those, and that's where we're starting with the I'm in the middle of disassembly of the original kit, and I just wanted to show you a couple things here. So first thing I'll show you is the drag chain here. You can undo it from these screws here. There's 2 little screws that go in, and then that'll free this up here, and you can actually, there's some cords that come down alongside the stepper bracket or the stepper motor itself, and you can disconnect. This is the plug for it right here. It plugs in the back there, so I just disconnected that and got it out of the way, and you can swing the cables, get them around the side of it there, so they go in like this, and you can kind of swing it out of the way and get the drag chain like out of the way. And then on the other end of it, where it attaches to the carriage plate, I've removed the hot end, and I've disconnected the fans, removed the layer cooling fan. I've disconnected the limit switch, and also this is the F400, so it's got the IR board on the bottom for the bed leveling. I've disconnected that, and then I've undid the bracket that attaches to the front. So this whole thing is disconnected from the carriage plate, the X carriage plate, and can actually just kind of just hang out of the way, just like that. And then so the carriage plate is here, obviously, and that will be, next would be taking that off. And then I've got the tensioner, the left side tensioner here removed, and you can see the 4 spacers and the idlers that we're going to be using. So we're going to want to save those. You won't need the screws or the nuts or anything, just the spacers and the idlers themselves, and the T-slot nuts. You save those. You don't need screws to save the screws, but we will need the T-slot nuts. So all I do is loosen them up, and then it can slide out the end of the T-slot here. I've got this one already loose, so you can just kind of swing it out of the way and then it slides off. So obviously I've cut the cables so that I can do all this. And then the stepper brackets, basically there's a screw underneath there, and then there's a screw up top here. So you want to take the top one all the way out. There's a little bit of blue Loctite on them, so they're kind of crunchy when they unscrew. But yeah, you just want to pull the top screw out, and then the whole thing can come off like that. Then you've got the T-slot nut there. You'll want to save that. So that's where I'm at now. I just wanted to share that. You don't want to unscrew the screws that hold the Y extrusion rails. You want to keep those tight because they're positioned parallel of each other, and if you loosen them and retighten them, it can go out of parallels. You want to make sure that you don't loosen the screws that are actually attached to the brackets. So there's one on top and then one on the bottom on each side, and then on the Y on the front here, you've got one underneath there that holds the Y extrusion bracket, and then the cross brace is what supports it up top. So anyway, that's where I'm at right now with it, and I'm just going to repeat the same thing over here with the other stepper bracket, and then I'll begin disassembling the carriages, and then I'll have the X gantry here will be loose, and then I'll be marking things so I know where the center is on the extrusion rails for the install of the new kit. And I just wanted to show you the what I got here is the Y-axis limit switch. There's one screw that goes in on top of this brace here, or in front of the brace, that goes across that one screw. You need to remove that all the way, and then this whole thing can just come up and out of the way, and then you can see the cord can swing around the stepper motor just like the stepper motor wires for the drag chain. And then we're not going to be using this 3D printed bracket anymore, so we've got a metal one, and that the limit switch will be saving. That attaches to the new bracket, so we can pull these wires right off, and then we've got just that. So we're going to want to save just the switch portion of it, and then those wires can kind of go down and out of the way now. And then this is the right stepper bracket, and the stepper motor itself is this is a little bit hard to access. So there's a screw on the bottom. You do not loosen this one here, because this is the only screw that's keeping the Y-axis extrusions located and paralleled. So if you loosen that screw, same on the other side here, if you loosen that, the extrusion will be able to move, and we don't want that. You want to keep that that screw on the front bracket here. Don't turn that one. This is the screw for the stepper. So all you need to do is loosen that. And what you can do is, if you're having trouble, you get one of these ball end hexes, and this is just a 4mm wrench. And what you can do is, if you really want to get in there easily, you can take a cheap one and grind it down so that it's kind of a low profile, and you can kind of sneak it in between. See, it's a little tight, it won't go in,
you can actually grind it down so that it'll go in between this bracket and the screw head there, so that you can just need to loosen it, and then you take out the one on top, the cross brace, and then the whole stepper, you can kind of just work it out like that, and then now you've got the whole thing out, and there's how you remove that side, and then the cross brace is loose now. So that's, you can actually just set that down here by the drag chain for now as well. So then we're going to be saving the T-slot nuts on everything. So the idlers, we want to save the idlers and the T-slot nuts on the idlers, and then also the T-slot nuts for the stepper brackets. The T-slot nut on the top side of the stepper brackets should stay in there because we're going to be removing the screw completely. They'll stay in. But yeah, so the next step is going to be just removing the carriage plates. So I've got most of this disassembled. I'm still in the disassembly phase right now, and I've got my gantry disassembled here. So I took the back carriage brackets off, and I've got here's the gantry here, and so we need to salvage a couple parts here, and that's the idlers. So you just need to get these idlers out, and so I just again loosened these off here. They slide right off the end once they're loose, and you're gonna want to save the T-slot nuts again. Those are right here, top and bottom. Actually, you only need the top ones. You won't need the bottom. And then basically you have a screw that goes, I must have already took those out, but you've got on the idlers, to get those out, you've got a screw that goes down and threads into the plastic there. So you want to undo that one screw there, and then the bracket should pop out, and then you've got a dowel pin that goes through. And then this is the idler. That's all you want on both sides. So pop the other one off, and then that's it. So you just want the top T-slot nut, and then the idlers on both sides, and that's all we'll be saving on that. And then obviously we'll be reusing the gantry extrusion there. So I just wanted to show you where I'm at there, and I'll be starting the actual assembly. I just wanted to show you one more thing before we start the actual assembly process. So I've got everything disassembled right now, and I have only the components that I'm actually going to be saving from the original kit. This is the F400, so that's what this little board's for. If you have the F410, you don't have to worry about that. So you would normally be saving this little board here for the F400. That's the IR sensor for the bed leveling. And everything else should be the same for the F410. All of the components here are what you're going to want to save. And then I've got everything else down there that we're not saving. So we've got the 8 idlers, 8 spacers, and then we've got our T-slot nuts, and then our limit switch brackets. And then what you're going to want to do while everything is assembled is clean the extrusions really well. You want to make sure they're pretty well spotless, nice and smooth. You don't want to be feeling any like pieces of filament or something that maybe got caught in there and kind of stuck to the rails. You want it to be silky smooth on both sides, and also the gantry extrusion rail. You want to make sure, especially this gantry extrusion rail likes to get a little dirty. You want to make sure that everything is good and clean as possible while it's all disassembled. And then
what you're going to want to do also, while it's all disassembled, is take an 18-inch ruler and go ahead and put a little mark in the center of each extrusion. So got an 18-inch ruler here, mark it at about 9 inches. It's not 100% critical, but it's going to come in handy later when we go to do the actual cable installation. It's kind of the final part of the assembly when we actually attach the cables to the X carriage plate. And then I've also done the same thing on the Y-axis extrusion. So I just take my ruler and I go right up against the bracket there, and I just mark it at 9 inch and both sides. Again, that's just so that we can use those as references to make sure everything is centered when we go to do the actual cable install process. That's going to be down the road, but it's better to mark them now. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that, and now we're going to be starting the actual assembly of the upgrade kit. Alright, so the next thing you're going to want to do is put the Y carriage brackets on. You got to install those onto the Y-axis extrusion rails, and you do that by so it'll come like this, and what you're going to want to do is loosen the top wheels. So you don't want to loosen the ones with the eccentric hexes on it. Those don't ever need to be loosened, and there's actually Loctite on those nuts. So you basically, all you need to do is loosen these enough. You kind of bring the nut out to near, about halfway off the thread there, so that they're just flopping around like that a little bit. And all that's to do is to get enough play so that the carriage can go over the extrusion like that. So it's just sitting there loose like that, and then you'll want to tighten these back up with an Allen wrench. And then the nut size is a 7mm wrench, and that is the same size as your Hotend nozzle. So you just put that on the back side, and hold your Allen wrench from keeping the bolt from spinning, and tighten these up, and you'll notice that it will still be loose on there after it's tight. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it right now. I'm gonna set you over here actually, so maybe you can see a little bit. Probably not. I'm just putting my finger on the back of the nut while I turn it with the turn the Allen wrench, turn the screw with the Allen wrench. So I'm just holding the nut, and you can kind of get it snug with the Allen wrench, and then get on it with the wrench. You don't have to go crazy. I mean, snug is snug. Get up to snug, and then just maybe a quarter turn after past that, and you're tight. So okay, I've got the carriage standoffs tightened now, so you can see it's installed. They're no longer flopping around. They're attached firmly to the plate, but it's still got play in it. And that is because the eccentrics down below here, you need to use a 7/16 wrench to get on the hex heads here, or the hex eccentrics, and you swing them. I like to swing one this way, and then I swing the other one this way. It doesn't really matter. I just try to keep things symmetric. I just swing it in there, and you want to be, as you do that, you want to check what you're doing. You don't want to crank it down too much. So you just want to keep going until you feel it. You'll start to feel the play. You can disappear. You can kind of go back and forth a little bit. I'm kind of giving it about a quarter of a turn at first, and then let's see, I'm gonna
Go ahead and give it a little bit more on this side. You'll notice the play will start to kind of go away. And I'll swing it in more. Maybe just a little bit more on this side. You notice this side now it's not really moving, but this side you can kind of see still has some play. I'm swinging it in a little more, and there. That's what you want. So that's just for now. We're not like setting the tension on the wheels just yet. So we're just kind of getting things loosely installed right now. So you don't want to have it like so it's barely moving. If it's barely moving at all, the eccentrics are probably too tight. And then, so I've got the other one installed too, and you can see there's no play at all, but it rolls nice and free. So again, you want to get those eccentrics. It's not critical right now. You can actually adjust them while they're on the machine. And one thing I wanted to point out, there is a break-in period for the wheels, and they're basically what you'll get is the wheel will actually conform to the T-slot slightly, so you'll get a little bit ridges inside on the wheels, and it's basically like a little bit of a white ring you'll get on where it touches the extrusion rail. If you end up getting that like really bad, and you start getting wear, the wheels will start to prematurely wear out. That is most likely because the eccentrics are too tight. So you want to be able to spin the wheels without the carriage moving. You can kind of feel the drag. You can kind of turn the wheel. If it's not turning very easily, you want it to kind of spin, pretty easily without much effort to spin it. If it's hard to spin, then you need to loosen your eccentrics. And if you ever are running your machine and you've got the white ring there that's getting worse and worse and worse, and it's bigger and bigger, it's most likely your eccentrics are too tight and you want to back them off. Once they're set just right, you don't ever have to mess with them again, and they will break in and then they'll stop breaking in. One of the reasons why that happens is because Fusion 3 decided to use T-slots for the motion system here instead of actual V-wheels extrusion rails. So that's one of the reasons why you actually have some wear and you can't crank them down real tight, because there's a really high pressure spot right there, and it's rubbing, it's kind of a little friction on the wheels. But anyway, so it's not critical to get them perfect right now, but that's what you want to do next. Alright, so I've got my extrusion rail loosely installed between the two Y-axis carriage plates. So basically what you do is you set the T-slot nuts in there, and then you take the carriage, or the gantry extrusion here, and you bring it up from the bottom, and then you can line it up. You'll have to slide it back and forth, and you get it lined up with the T-slot, and you can get the screw started on one side and then the other. So I've got it loose in there, and you can kind of see everything is kind of just flopping around a little bit, and this thing can actually go back and forth side to side like this too. So what you want to do is try to get this centered between the two as possible. It's not 100% critical, but you just want to kind of get them, like I said, you just want to kind of get them just so it's about an even gap. There's going to be a little bit of a gap between the two the carriage plates, but once you get it where you want it, you just kind of tighten this back down all the way, and there's a tongue in the bracket that goes and attaches to the extrusion, and it kind of self-aligns it a little bit. So then when you tighten them down, it'll be pretty much perfectly perpendicular. So you just kind of crank them down. You don't have to go crazy right at this very moment. But anyway, that's now I've got. You can see nothing's really moving around anymore. I kind of, it won't slide back and forth. But yet the whole thing can move like this, and so that's how you install the gantry extrusion rail. The next step will be putting on the idlers. So we're gonna need 4 idlers for the gantry idlers, and we're going to need 4 standoffs as well, spacers. So 4 idlers and 4 spacers we're going to need to put on here. So then what we do is we unscrew that screw, a spacer goes on, and then the idler, and then the screw goes back in behind it on both sides, front and back. Oh, and make sure that when you go ahead and put your brackets up on, you put the one that has the bracket here on the left. If you accidentally put it on the right side, they're the same bracket, so you can take this is the limit switch stop, so you can take that and move it from this side to this side. It needs to be on the left back side like this. So we want idlers on both sides, left and right carriage brackets, and front and back on each one. So 4 idlers are going on. So I'm installing the cross brace right now. That's this gray bar in front, and what I'm doing is I've got a little trick to get this installed just right. So what I do is I attach it over here first, because this rail is bolted down against the chassis of the machine, and this is a nice anchor point that should never move, given that you didn't loosen the bottom screw there. So it shouldn't move at all, because we still got it bolted there, and we've got it bolted underneath on both sides. So I like to attach the right side first, and then so what happens is when you take this one off, this post here is got some play in it. So what I do is this is why I attach the gantry extrusion first, so that when you move it forward, it'll actually self-align itself. You can see what it does just by moving this forward and backwards. It's actually self-aligning itself. We're literally using the machine to align it. So then once I move that forward like that, then I put my screw in and go ahead and tighten it down. So it's kind of gotta get the T-knot in just right, but camera don't focus for nothing. Kind of walking on me a little bit, but anyways, it's easier to do when you got 2 hands, obviously. But yeah, you want the cross brace to be right flush with the end of the extrusions. As you tighten it, you're going to want to keep pulling it back, obviously, to keep it from walking. So yeah, snug is good, and it's pretty much all you need to do. So there, now that the cross brace is installed, everything can move nice and freely, and the Y extrusion rails will be parallel with each other. This camera is not focusing very good, sorry. But anyway, yeah, that's what I do there for installing a cross brace. So I've got that on now. So I've got the cross brace installed here, and I've got the gantry on and the Y carriage brackets for the gantry, all that installed. And now what I'm going to be doing is installing the tensioner, the rear tensioners. So that's what these are. And the you want this would be the left one, so you want the idlers to be on the inside. And so I've installed the idlers. These will be the last of the 8 that we're going to be using. The other 4 basically. So I've got a spacer. This is how they go on. So you've got the spacer, the idler, and then the nut, and the screw goes down through the middle, obviously, and then you basically get the oval T-slot nut is the ones I'm using on the back, and then they just slide on like that. And I'll be doing the same thing with the other side. This would be the right one here, and this is how they come. You just got a screw and the nut. You take the nut off, and then you put your spacers on, and then the idlers. The one thing I wanted to mention about the idlers is what I like to do is clean off any grease or anything that's on them before I use them again. And I re-lubricate them with an oil called Slick 50, and you can get that at like an auto store. It's a really good it's like a thinner lubricant that's really good. I use it on clocks and stuff like that for repairing clocks, but it just helps them glide a little easier, smoother, so you know you're not running dry with the bearings and stuff like that. It's just a little thing I like to do extra. So I've got the rear tensioners installed, and one thing I wanted to point out here, this is a pretty critical step, and a lot of guys that do cable replacements and the installations with these kits, I've had some guys do this as well. When you get your tensioners on, you want them tipped slightly in like this, so that way when you get the cable installed, you'll have enough room to move them out to take up slack. You want to have them both set inward. And now this is the critical part. You don't want to go too far in, or else what will happen is the cable, because this is the idler up here, if you go too far in, the cable will rub on the end of the extrusion and it will cut. So you don't want to be going too far in. And one way that I do it, that I check it, is you can look down the extrusion like this, and you can see, if you can't see that idler, then you're in too far. So if I move too far in, I'll just show you what it looks like. I move too far in with it.
So I just moved it in more. You can see what it looks like now. I've got that thing tipped in pretty far now. And take a look. I can't see the idler. So what that means is the cable coming off the stepper bracket is going to be rubbing on the end of the extrusion, and that's a sharp edge right there. So you're going to end up abrading the cable, and it will break. So you can't have your tensioners moved in that far. You need to have them tipped in, but not to the point where it's where you're going to be rubbing. So now you can see I backed it up, and you can see right down in there now. I have visibility on that the idler. So that will track on the idler instead of the end of the extrusion. And the other side you're not going to be able to do that with, obviously, because the side of the machine is in the way. So what you want to do is just, you know, get it set and then match it. Try to match it visually as good as you can. If in doubt, you can back it over to the other way, so that way you know you've got enough room there. But the reason why I tip them inward is obviously so that we can take up some slack as the cable breaks in, because that will happen a couple times. As you use the machine, the cable will get tighter during a hot print, and after it cools down, the cable will go slack, and you'll want to take up that slack by moving those outward. So that's a really critical part there that people need to be careful of. That's one of those gotcha things. You know, a lot of people go through the trouble doing an install. It's true with the original stepper, or the original tensioners as well. If they're tipped too far in after your cable install, they will rub on the end and abrade the cable, and they will break. So just wanted to share that. So I just thought of a way for you guys to get the tensioners inboard just right without having to worry about them being tipped in too far or not enough. So basically what I've figured out is the perfect positioning is actually enough to slide a business card. You just take a business card and you kind of just slide it along the extrusion there and go between the first idler there. And if it's not moving at all, so you can see it's just starting to move, so it's just barely touching the business card when I have it flat against the rail. And that right there is perfect for positioning the tensioner optimally, so that you've got maximum amount of travel, but yet it's not in too far to where it's rubbing on the cable will be rubbing on the extrusion end. So you can see on this side here, you can do the same thing. So I've got little marks on top of the idler so you can see it. So you can see what's going on here. This one is actually pushed in, or not pushed in as far. So what I'll show you is if it's in too far, so if your tensioner is in too far, when you take the business card and you slide it in, the idler will not move. So that's real close again. So I'm gonna go ahead and tip it in a little farther just to show you what I mean. So if your tensioner is in too far, you take a business card and you slide it in back and forth, the tensioner will not move.
So that is in too far. So what you want it to move just a little bit. So that's just one little trick that I found to see if you're matched on either side, because you can't visually see it on the other side, obviously, but you do have visual on the inside stepper or idler. So again, take your business card and you can kind of slide it in and out like that and adjust the tensioner so that it just starts to move with your business card on both sides, and then you know you're matched. And again, you can see where it puts you with the idler. It's just perfect for starting out. And again, if you put the business card in there, this is critical, that's why I keep repeating it. So when you put the business card in there up against the rail like that and it is not moving, the idler is not moving, then you're in too far with your tensioner and you need to move it out until it does. So that way you know for sure that you're not going to be rubbing on the end of the extrusion when you have your cables installed. And you can actually check that after cables are installed too, even just to make sure. So you can actually kind of see where the card is. You know, obviously the cable won't let the idler move, but you'll at least be able to see if there's a gap. You can kind of play with it a little bit and you'll be able to see how much of a gap there is between the card and the idler. But that's just a little trick that I figured out here to get the spacing just right for the tensioners. Alright, so now what I'm going to be doing is installing the X carriage plate, and here we are right here with it. And it's basically the same way as you get it on the extrusion the same way as you do the Y carriage brackets. You loosen up the top ones so that the wheels are loose like that, just like this. You don't need to take them all the way off, just loosen it up. Again, you don't want to loosen the eccentrics, the ones on the bottom, the hex on it, just the top, and you know, it'll just, you know, go over the extrusion like that, and then you'll want to tighten them up. What I like to do is put a finger on the nut on the back and then use the Allen wrench to, you know, get it somewhat tight before I go cranking it down real good. If you go to put the carriage plate on and it's not seating right for some reason, check these two screws. This is to attach the drag chain to the carriage plate. Sometimes these screws are screwed in too far. If they're in too far, they'll actually obstruct against the rail itself. So you want to just be mindful of that. And so that's all there is to getting that on. Alright, so I'm going to be installing the stepper brackets. So these are the new stepper brackets that I have designed here. They're a little simpler to install than the original ones. So I just kind of redesigned these a little bit because, you know, the other ones that we had, they were kind of a basically an aluminum version of the original plastic stepper brackets, and because we're making these out of aluminum, we don't really need to have the bracket supported on the top and bottom of the extrusions like the originals. I got one over here, kind of see like that. Don't really need to have it designed like that, and it just makes it a little harder to install it. So I went ahead and, like I said, redesigned these so they're a little easier to install. So you can see it's got a little bit of a tongue and groove now, so it actually self-aligns on the extrusion, and
It's nice and beefy. It's actually 1/4 inch thick aluminum, and it kind of mounts. It's like kind of mounts the same way the original one did, but just the bottom part only. And then you just simply got the T-slot nut. I recommend the long end on the top, and then you just simply, you know, stick it in the extrusion end like that, and then you kind of push it forward like this while you tighten it from the bottom. And it's actually got a little bit of friction, so it will sometimes it'll actually stay right where you put it just with friction, but then you just get under it with I recommend a ball end hex wrench, and you just kind of get under there like that. Just see the T-nut go down. And I recommend doing it without the stepper on it, because it gives you better access to the screw. And then that's it. Then the stepper itself will attach, you know, as usual, and then it gives you full access to everything. You can see very easily what's going on. There's, you know, no side walls to block your view. You can see really well what's going on in there. And the other side is obviously the hardest one to do, and that's really another reason why I went on ahead and redesigned it, is because some guys were having trouble getting the right side installed, and so this is quite a bit easier to deal with. So you can either attach the stepper first and then install the bracket with the stepper attached, but again, I don't necessarily recommend that. It's easy enough to just attach the stepper afterward. It gives you it lets you mount the bracket easier. So again, you just do the same thing on the other side. It's a little more cramped obviously, but it's really not too bad to do it anymore. You just kind of come up at an angle like this and line up your T-slot nut. Just got to get that lined up, and then in it goes, and then you just simply tighten it from the bottom with the one screw there. And sometimes, like if you're having trouble getting in there, you can kind of reach it with the ball end at an angle, but you could actually take one of these wrenches and grind some of it down so that it fits in between that bracket and the screw, and then you can crank it down easier. So I'm going to be installing the Y-axis limit switch. So this is the little bracket here. That's what this part's for. And you can see I've got the limit switch attached to the bracket already. So it just uses these small screws that go through and holds it on like that. So you want it just like this. So you don't want it on the inside or facing backwards. You want to make sure it's facing this direction. And then what you want to do is take like an Allen wrench or something and just go through the hole and kind of make sure your T-slot nut is aligned. You can kind of see down in there a little bit. You want to just look down in there, make sure it's aligned as good as you can. And then you take the bracket and just kind of set it in there. And then find my Allen wrench. And you just simply take your Allen wrench and put on the top, and then start screwing that down. So you want to keep it aligned as you tighten it. So then
you want it to be straight so that when your carriage comes, or your gantry comes back, it actuates the switch like this. So that's how you install that. And then the cord for it attaches. These are the cords here. Once it's on, you can reattach it, so the cord just comes around. It doesn't matter which one hooks to what. You just want one hooked to the top and one hooked to the bottom. You're not using the middle. Just one on the top, one on the bottom, doesn't matter which one. So that's how you might need to get a little slack. You just kind of pull a little slack out of there, and then obviously they just slide on like that. And want to make sure it's good and out of the way for when you're working on the cables. If you attach the cable, or if you attach the cord to the limit switch before you install the the steppers with the cables, you want to make sure you're not trapping the cord between the cable and the extrusion. The cable is obviously going to be going in between the extrusion, and like I said, you don't want to be trapping the cord in there, so just make sure that you're mindful of that when that step comes. But that's how you install the limit switch there, and again, it just actuates there, and you want it to be straight in line with the extrusion rail. So this is what the Y-axis limit switch looks like when it's installed. I've just got the cable routed around the back, so I pulled a little bit of slack to get it out to the connectors here, and then I just grab a hold of it down here and pulled the slack back out that I didn't need. So it just kind of keeps it nice and neat there, and you can see how it actuates. So that's all there is to that. Just wanted to show you that. Alright, so it's time to deal with the actual steppers themselves and the spools. And so we're going to be upgrading to the 0.9 degree steppers, and these are to improve the overall print quality. The 0.9 degree gives it double the resolution as the 1.8 degree steppers that come standard, and it's a pretty significant upgrade, and it's very inexpensive to do. As long as you're doing this upgrade with the kits and everything, this might not be a bad thing for you to consider doing. Again, it just helps improve the print quality, and that's actually one of the reasons why I'm going ahead and doing all this, is because I want the highest quality prints. And because I've got one printer that's upgraded and the other is not, I can't get the same quality parts off of the same machine, or off of the two different machines. So I'm trying to get them on the same page so that they can make the same parts quality. So if you're not going to be upgrading your steppers, it is possible to wrap the spools without removing them, but it's going to be pretty difficult to do. So I would go ahead and plan on removing the spools to wrap them. And let me see. So one thing you're going to want to do, just to help things go a little smoother in the when you go to install the spools again, is take a caliper and measure you want to measure the depth of the spool. So you want to just kind of go like that, and just take a note of how deep the shaft is in relation to the top of the spool. We're going to fine tune that later, but it helps get you in the ballpark when you go ahead and reinstall the pre-wrapped spool. You want to do that on, they should be the
Anyway, so yeah, you want to take note of that. That's one way to get the spool located properly. And then getting the actual spool off, it can be a little tricky. So you've got the Allen wrench here. This, you want to loosen that up, obviously, so it's not gripping the shaft. But there's still friction fit on the shafts pretty tight. And they can be a little tricky to get off. So what I've got here is just a little vise. If you have one, some sort of a clamp to hold the stepper in place while you do this. What I like to do is I get under one side with one screwdriver, and then I get under the other side with the other screwdriver, so it's kind of looking like that, and then I push down equally on both sides to help pry the spool off, and it should come off fairly easily, but that's how I recommend getting the spools off. And obviously want to label them so that you know which one is which, so that you can reference that when you're going to reinstall them. So anyways, that's what I'm going to do right now, is get these spools off, and then we'll go on to their wrapping them, and I'll show you my method for how I wrap them. Alright, as the spool begins to come off the shaft, you can kind of slip your screwdrivers further under like this, and just to help get a little more grip, or you can actually put some shims on underneath to help give it more of an angle to pry it up further. But at this point, when you're this high, there's not a lot of friction left in there, and it's coming off pretty easily. The most important thing you want to do is to try to make sure you're putting even pressure on both sides of the screwdrivers, so that way it's coming straight off and it's not wrenching it towards one way or the other. That'll just help ensure that there won't be any damage done to the spool as it's being removed. So this spool is about to come off here, and I'll be doing the other one. I just wanted to I'm just trying to share as many tips as I can here, just to make this as painless as possible. So this is pretty much what we're dealing with here, is getting to be this, and then the cable wrapping and the actual cable installation is the most challenging part of this whole thing. And it's actually a part of maintenance when owning these cable drive printers. It's only a matter of time before these cables break, and you're gonna need to know how to do this. It's one of those things that once you've done it once, it's much easier the second time. But stick close to these tips here and follow the guide closely, and you should be able to do this without having too much trouble. So alright, so I've got the dampers removed from the old steppers and installed onto the new steppers, and I just wanted to show you what I do there. So I've got, you want to kind of decide which way you want the cables to go on the install. So on the left side, I want the cables to be coming off the stepper in this direction, and then on the right side I want the cord to be coming off on the right. So it's not critical, it's just makes the cable management a little bit easier for me. Again, you don't really, it's not that critical. So what I've done is I've got the dampers installed so that they're symmetric. So I've got them opposite each other, so you can kind of see this would be the front of the machine, and then I've got one bolted this way and the other one bolted that way. It's not critical, it's just a little just in the interest of symmetry, just to kind of, I like to try to keep things symmetrical if I can, so that if and when one of the dampers does flex, they're going to be flexing in a common way. So anyways, that's what I wanted to show you there. And so one side of the damper is threaded and the other has through hole. The through hole, it goes down and then the screw goes through it into the stepper itself, and then the other side is threaded, and that will be threading to the bottom of the actual stepper bracket from the top. And so I wanted to point this out to the they've got everything like Loctited and lacquered. I don't know what the heck is all over these things, but it's almost like a lacquer, and it locks everything up. And so you may run into some problems getting the screws out of the old stepper motors. You don't want to round out the hex head or the screw head if you can help it. You really want to be careful of that, otherwise it'll just be harder to get out. So what I had to do is actually get on it with a little mini torch here to heat it up so that I can get it backed out. You want to use a really tight fitting wrench. You don't want to be going at it with a rounded Allen wrench like this one, rounded off. If it's tight, that's not going to work. You're going to want to use a nice, crisp, tight fitting Allen wrench to get them out. Anyways, so that's pretty much all there is to that. I've got the dampers installed, and now we're going to be on to wrapping spools and then getting the spools back on to the new stepper shafts. So I'll show you how I do that then. Alright, so I'm going to be wrapping up the spools now, and I just wanted to show you how to do that. So this is what you're going to be needing right here to do this. You set the clips aside for now. You got 2 cables, so you're going to want to take and undo the tape. Just pull the tape off, and what you'll notice is one of the sides, there's an end that has a black mark on it, and then if you follow that up, you'll see that there's another mark that represents the 4-foot mark. So what I like to do is I like to take, basically all you got to do is take the side that the end that has the mark on it, and then I go down into the spool. So you take that mark, go down, and then you pull it all the way through until the other black mark is inside the spool. So you can see the there's the mark right there. So you pull it down, you can kind of see it coming out the bottom there. You want it not that critical, you just pull it through that so that it's inside the spool. Then you take the short end with the mark on it, and there's another hole that goes at an angle. So you take that and then you go through like that, and you can see it come right out like that. Okay, so then you pull that. Want to be careful and not catch the other cable. And then the long end without the mark on it, that's the one coming out the top. So then that does the same thing. So then you come out at an angle. There's another hole that comes out at an angle like that, and then you just, that's how that works. So then you pull that one all the way through. Just like that. Oops, slipped it through. So you want the black mark inside the spool. Long end is on the top, the short end is on the bottom. This is just my method for how I like to do it, and So the short end on the left spool. So this is the left spool. And so what we're going to want to do is take the short end that's on the bottom and wrap that we're going to want to wrap it toward the right, looking at it like this. So basically the short end goes inward. So here's the left spool. You want the inside, you want the short end to be on the inside. So looking down on the spool, we're wrapping it counterclockwise from the bottom toward the middle. So I'm going to go around. You want to try to keep each wrap. You don't want to be wrapping each. You don't want it to be on top of the other wraps. You want to have it wrapped evenly, so that it's not bunched up over the top. So I'm just wrapping this around until it's about in the middle. So it's about, I believe it's about 9 wraps until you're in the middle. So you can actually count how many wraps you got. There's one. You gotta look close, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm gonna do 2 more wraps on it. Again, I'm keeping the cable nice and packed onto the spool and not having wraps going over the top. So there's 7, and there's 8. So there's that. So this is one of the trickiest parts of doing this. So then once you have that done, you want to do the same thing on the top side. But that wraps the other way. Looking down on top of the spool, the long end on the left spool will wrap clockwise. There's 1, 2, 3, and you can use your thumbnail to kind of push the layers upward to give you more room. Then there's, okay, so we're at 3, 4, 5. You want to again keep them going up. Kind of hold it with your thumb when you need to. 6. Getting a little tight. 7. Once you've got it wrapped around like that, then you take your clip and then that goes over it like this. So that keeps the cable from coming off. So that's how you do that. So then you'll have on the left spool, you'll have the short end. Looking down on top of the spool, you'll have the short end on the right side, and then you'll have the long end on the left side. So that's how I wrap the spools. That's that one, and we're going to be doing the exact opposite with the right spool. We're going to pull the tape off of that one. Here we got the marked end again, and then up a few feet we'll have the black mark in the middle. So that's, again, that represents the 4-foot or say the 8-foot mark. They're 12-foot cables. So then you're going to want to go down from the top again, all the way through the spool. So that's the hole furthest, closest to the shaft. It goes all the way through. Pull it up, keep pulling until you get that black mark in the middle of the spool, and then you can pinch that over with your finger, and then you go in with the other end again. You got the marked end, and then that goes in the hole that comes in at an angle. So that comes out like that, and then you pull that all the way through. And then you do the same thing with the long end. So then the long end, you want to be careful not to knot anything. Then the long end, you want to find the angle pull, and then that comes through just like that. Pull that all through again. This is probably the hardest part of this whole thing, and it's a part of maintenance really, is wrapping these spools. So now that I have the cable in, I've got the short end on the bottom again and the long end on the top. On the right spool, looking down, we want to take the short end and go clockwise with it. So that's the opposite of the left side. So I like to do the short one first. So I will go ahead and do that. So I'm going to get the long side of the cable out of the way, and then I'm going to take and start wrapping this from the bottom up, clockwise, looking down on top of the spool. About 8 turns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see how it's not very smooth there. So I'm just simply sliding it down like that, kind of packing it down, and then 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to go ahead, now that I have 8 wraps on there, I'm going to push this all down. And I'm not letting it go slack. I always keep a thumb holding that cable while I'm doing this. So now that I've got that done, so there's the short end, and that's coming off on the inside of the right spool. Now I'm going to do counterclockwise with the long end now. So holding this. Alright, so the video cut out on the last, while I was wrapping the right spool. So basically all I did was the same thing as the left spool, but opposite. So I just wanted to show you this. So I've got the right spool in my hand, and you'll see the long side is on the right of the right spool, and then the short end is on the left side of the right spool. So there you can see that. And then again, the left spool is opposite that. So on the left side of the left spool, you've got the long side of the cable. And on the right side of the left spool, you've got the short side of the cable. That's the side with the mark on it. Both of these. The short side is the one with the mark on it. You want it on the inside of the spools. And now they are ready to be installed on the stepper shafts. So that is where the reference we made with the calipers comes in. So mine was about 3.5 millimeters. This isn't critical. We're just going to get this somewhat close, but I'm going to show you how I do that. Alright, so now that I've got the spools wrapped, I'm going to go ahead and just pick one and do that one first. I guess what I'm going to do is the right one. Let's do the right one first. So I got the right spool here, and what I like to do is just get it started with, you know, finger pressure. You can kind of line it up with the D shaft here if you want. I like to kind of put that opposite the shaft. The flat spot of the D shaft is over here, and then my clamping, the spool clamp is on the opposite side. I like to do them like that. It's not that big a deal, and then I just push them on. And then I don't like to just go crazy, because what'll happen is you go a little too far with it, and then you've got to back it up. So I like to take a clamp like this, and then I kind of get on it like this, and slowly, incrementally, you can kind of see how it squeezes it on, like that. It's a little more controllable, and you can kind of check loosen it up and kind of check where you're at as you're getting it on. You can just kind of check. Obviously, I've got some ways to go, about two more millimeters or so, and so I'm just going to go ahead and continue on with that. A little bit more, and you kind of check it again, see where you're at. So that's getting a little closer now. So maybe do a little bit more here. And you can actually do this while it's installed on the printer. There, just a little bit more. So let's see where we're at. I'm just trying to get this a little bit close, not too crazy, accurate. So we're all right, you know. I was going for 3.5. You know, I'm off by about 1/4 millimeter or so, or about 1/2 millimeter. That's okay. We can fine tune that once we get it installed in the printer. We're gonna want to check this anyways and get the depthing just right. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with the other motor. So this is the left. I'll get this one out of the way. And then I'm just gonna do the same thing, get the D shaft over. And remember, this is the front of the machine. This is facing the front of the machine here. And I like to put the clamp opposite the D shaft flat. And I get it started with my fingers. And then again, you've got more control with this, so you're not just gonna slip past where you're trying to end up. You can actually use the other one for reference while you're cranking it down. Just get it close, and then you can kind of check the depthing. Check it again. Let's make sure we're zeroed. Kind of check that again. So we're about 4 millimeters. We're getting pretty close. We're within about 0.1 millimeters of the other one, just by visually lining it up. You know, just looking side by side. They're pretty similar. So anyway, that's pretty much the hardest part of doing this. I'm actually going to go one more, just a little bit more on this one to get it just a little closer. There. Just one more little click, and check it again. Yeah, see, now we're pretty much exactly the same. Alright, so now the steppers are actually ready to be installed on the machine. Alright, so what I like to do when I do this install on the steppers here to the stepper brackets, here's my stepper. I've got it all wrapped up and ready to go. You want to be careful not to like yank anything and undo your wrap. Just be careful of that. So I've got the screws that are going to attach to the damper in the correct locations. I have the front right and rear left, and I've got screws in both of those holes. So what I do is I take the cable like this, both cables in my hands here, and then I go between and then up from the bottom like this. You can see the screws come up, and then you just simply thread those, get them threaded there. You can get them threaded, get them started. I've got a better wrench right here for this actually. So this is kind of a handheld hex, like a screwdriver. It's a little easier to screw things in. You want to make sure you're not pinching your cable in there. Make sure it's still loose there, and you know you can tighten it down. And then what I like to do, I get the longer side is on the left, so that I can just get it on the left side. I'm just kind of getting it out of the way for now. It's kind of off to the side there, and then I've got the right side on the inside, and that's the short one. So then once I have it like that, I like to locate the spool right in the middle. You can kind of look down on top. And then, yeah, looking down on top, you can align that. And then what I like to do is take some tape, like this, and go right over the top of the spool to keep it from turning while you're doing the cable install. That just kind of locks everything down. And then again, we've got the short one on the inside on the left and the long one on the outside. I'm sorry, the short one on the right side of the left spool, and then we've got the long end on the left side of the left spool. And then the opposite is true with the other side. So that's how I do the install of the actual stepper with the bracket and everything. And so I'm going to repeat this step on the left or on the right side. Alright, so now I'm doing the install on the right stepper motor. The right side's obviously a little harder because we've got the back wall here. We can't really access the side. So what I like to do is I take the motor itself with the spool and everything, and I set it up on top. And I get the short end out of the way for now. And I've got the long end in my hand. So that's the side without the mark, and that goes on the outside of the extrusion. So I like to take this end and then I lace it through. I get it through the extrusion before the stepper goes in. So I'm just kind of feeding that through, just to make sure there's no it's not going to trap any of the cables. And then I just kind of grab it with my tweezers here, and then I've got that properly laced through the extrusion there. That's before I go in there with the stepper. Okay, so now that that's in, I can go ahead and grab the stepper motor again here, and the short side is going to be on the inside here. So I'm going to just keep taking up some slack with this, and then the short side of the cable is going to go in between the stepper bracket and then under the brace like that. So then it comes up. Remember, don't want to pinch anything in there, so you want to take up your slack as you tighten it up. And then that's kind of how it should look when you come in from the bottom. And then you just got to get your screws tight. Ball ends, a wrench can help with this. Get the first one started, and then you can kind of get on it with the back. The back one's a little trickier to do. Probably blocking your view, but anyway, so just got those screws located with the threaded holes on the damper, and simply tightening those down.
don't have to go too crazy with anything as far as tightening goes. And once they're tight, kind of give them a little bit of a, maybe an eighth of a turn past that, and then you know you're good and tight. So the stepper is on, and I've got the cable already started for tracking, and we can start. We can get that out of the way. It's going to be going to the back of the machine on the outside there, and then the right one. That one's just going to be going up and around to the idlers. And so now we've got the right one installed, and I'm going to go ahead and lock it with some tape, just like the other side. It's going to be a little tricky getting some tape on there. I'm just going to kind of do the best I can here. So this is what I'll do. I'm going to take a longer piece, actually, get it a little bit longer in my hand here. Good. And then I can kind of fish it around like that. I can even tape it to the bottom. Align your spool, and then you can go down like that. Lock it just like the other side. That way when we're doing the cable install, you're not going to have to worry about the spool turning on you. So that's how I install my steppers that are wrapped, my pre-wrapped stepper spools and all that. So, alright, so I'm preparing to install the cable to the carriage plate, and you can see what I've done here. So remember when we marked the extrusion rails? That's what this part is for. So what I've done is I've got everything centered to those marks. So I've got the gantry located in the middle of that mark. So that represents the middle of the motion travel of the gantry. And then I've done the same thing with the X carriage, so you can see the mark in the middle there. I've got this lined up with that mark in the middle, and then I've got the silicone. I've just got some silicone tubing. You can use whatever you want to, whatever works. But this I find is a good way of shimming the carriages, so that they're not moving while we do the install. I just want everything located in the middle of the motion system here, so that when we install everything, we've got equal length cable on all sides, basically, and that way they'll save some headache down the road if cable lengths are different. So anyway, so yeah, I just wanted to show you that. I shimmed them with some silicone tubing. Nothing special. You know, that's just what I had laying around, you know, to work. And again, you can pretty much use just about anything you want, but it gives you full access to the extrusion, the sides where the cable is going to be tracking, and doesn't obstruct where the cable's got to actually go. So that's just my method of shimming things and keeping things ready for the cable to be installed. Alright, so now that I've got everything shimmed, what I want to do is mark where the cables are going to be attached to the anchor blocks. So what I'm going to do first is I like to take the short side. We can do the front first. So we want to get it around the spool, or I'm sorry, the idler. So then once it's wrapped around the idler like that, then we can kind of take and see where we're going to be attaching the cable. So I like to go right up across like this
and then I take a Sharpie, put a little mark right on the edge. So that is where I want the cable block. There's a little fork on the other side of the anchor block, and that's where I want the fork to be engaging the cable, is right there. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Take that, loop that around the idler, keeping it taut. You don't have to pull real hard. Oops. Make sure your cable doesn't come off of the idler, and make sure that it's on there correctly. So you want to just mark where, just put a little mark where the anchor block is going to attach to the cable. So that's what I do on that side, and then the back side I do the same thing. So it's a little more tricky to do this part. So take the long end of the cable, and you have to make sure it's laced through properly. So I got the right side I can do first. So I'm just going to get my Teflon loading tube out of the way. I'll feed that back through when I'm done later. But the only thing I've got to go push the end through is the brackets on the back corner there. So I'm going to just go ahead and lace that through and get a hold of the end, and then I'm going to pull the slack through, make sure I'm guiding it so that it's not catching anything. And then this one will go around the rear spool. This is one of the trickier parts of the install as well. So you want to go around the back spool, or idler, I keep saying spool, the idler in the back. You want to make sure you're tracking around the back there, and then you come up around the inside spool on the other side. So you're going from the back idler on the right side to the inside idler on the left side, and then that cable comes up from the back. You want to keep a finger on there to keep a little tension while you're doing this part. I like to make a loop like this and just kind of go around. You got to kind of fish it around the spool, and then you can just kind of keep tension on it all the time like this while you're pulling it through. And again, you don't want to pull it too hard, because remember, we've just got the spools taped. So you can probably yank that loose if you pull too hard. But anyway, so I've got that laced through properly. And then what I'm going to do is, it's a little awkward, but you can kind of hold it up and see where the anchor block is. I got my Sharpie, and I'm going to, while keeping tension, just putting a little mark generally where the anchor, there's a little notch for where the cable anchors, and that's where I want that. I want that notch right on the black mark. So there's that side. It's okay if the cable goes slack at this point. Not actually mounting it to the block as of yet. So then we're going to do the same thing with the other side. So I've got the long side of the cable on the right side over here. This one's easier to do, obviously, because we can get to it a little easier. I'm just keeping the slack on the outside of the machine, and then I've got my tag end here, and I'm just fishing it through that bracket there again, and we're going on the outside spool again.
I'm just going to pull my slack up. I'm not worried about it being on the spool just yet, but tape keeps coming off. Maybe use better tape than masking tape, but I'm just going around the spool in the back. I'll make sure it's tracking properly on the spool. So then I'm on the rear spool in the back, and now I'm keeping a little tension as I wrap it around the inside spool on the right side. So then there. So now you can see I've got that going there. And then again, I'm gonna probably end up blocking the camera view here, but I'm just trying to, I'm doing the opposite side here. I'm just making a loop with the string, and then I'm just kind of putting a finger on the idler back here so I don't lose it. And then I'm gonna try to lasso the idler from the back. It'd take a little bit to do it, but yeah, so this is maybe
kind of look in from the bottom and see what you're doing a little easier there.
now that I've got that lassoed there, oops, came off. Oh, don't be afraid. It just takes a little patience. And there, get it tracking on the spool properly. And I've got it tracking on all the spools. And you want to just double check and make sure you're actually on all the spools and you didn't lose it. And then again, I'm just looking up and putting a small mark right where I want my cable block. And then once they're all marked, then we can actually attach the cables to the anchor blocks. So that's the next step. Alright, so I've got the cable anchor blocks and bracket taken off. So here I've got the rear one. I like to do that one first. So basically what I'm going to do is I loosen up the actual screws that hold it on. And what we're doing is we're basically taking the tag end and then we go through the hole from the inside of the bracket. So we're going to go through like this. Make sure you're not wrapped around stuff, obviously, when you do this. And then I just basically go up to that mark we made and I put the V, there's a notch right in there. I put that notch right at it, and then I like to kind of just pinch it off my finger, and then I will wrap it in the direction that it screws in. So I just go around once like that, and then I can tighten it up a little bit while keeping pressure. You don't want that cable to pull it tighter. So that's how I do that. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. Just go through the hole, pull it through all the way up. This one's going to be a little harder because it's obviously not as much room to work with. You probably have to move around to the back of the machine. So you want to kind of cinch it up a little bit. Kind of see the black notches are the black marks are lined up. And what I'm going to be doing now is I wrap it in the direction again that the screw screws it down, so it'll grip it better. Now I'm going to go around once, like that, keeping tension. Don't worry if it slides off the notch. You can tighten that later, or you can get it in the knots later. So I'm just going clockwise, not cranking it too crazy tight, just enough to pinch it down good. And then I'm going to reposition the cable in the notch on both sides. So there, once the cable is positioned, this is actually the harder side to do. Now I can go ahead and reattach my anchor block to the carriage plate. So just start one screw, you get the longer ones go on this block. I'm just takes a second or two to get it lined up properly, but then kind of just get lined up like that. Screw it down. I have to go too crazy and strip the screws. Go there. So what I like to do is, now that they're actually tracking properly, double check it, and you can loosen one up. You can actually loosen both sides up and take up a little slack, if there is any. And then go ahead and tighten it down again. Don't go too crazy tight with it. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Take up a little of that slack. And then I'm tightening it down again. Not crazy tight, I'm just a little bit so that it grips. They actually grip very well, surprisingly, and you don't need to go too crazy with it. So then, now that we have the rear cable attached to the rear of the carriage there, now we just got to do the front. So same thing, this is actually a lot easier because we're dealing with the front side. So basically got my anchor block right here. You can take it right off if you want. And again, you want that notch to be somewhat close to the black mark that we made. So I kind of just put it up where that notch is. And then I come around the inside like this. Can pinch it off, and then I go clockwise around the screw head, because that's the direction it tightens. I'm going to go around once like that, keeping pressure on everything so that it doesn't pull more cable in as you tighten it. Just a little tight. I'm not going crazy with the tightening, so you know. And this is just a general thing. Don't worry if the cable falls off the spool. It's easy enough to just lasso it around again. That's another thing with these kits. It lets you get the cable on a lot easier. So then when you go to put that cable block on, you want to make sure that the notch, it's got a hold of the notch like that. And then you simply screw it on. Take your I highly recommend one of these hex screwdrivers. Oops, there goes that. You just gotta get it aligned, get it started. You know, once it's attached with one, the other is much easier to get just want to move the little block up so that when you tighten it down, these you can tighten down pretty good because we're not going to be taking those back off. Then going to repeat the same thing on the other side. Get my screw that I dropped. So then here we are with the other. You can actually just take the cable right off of the idler for now, just to make things a little easier to deal with. Let me just get this right out of here. Unlasso it there. So then loosen it up again here. So then here you find our black mark, just a small little black mark there, and I'm going to go ahead and put the notch right on that, and then I'm going clockwise around one time. Got it like this and go around. It's coming in, I'm just going around once like that, and I'm pinching everything down while I tighten it. Not going crazy tight. And then you can see I've got my black notches marked is right on the notch there. So then I'm going to go ahead and fish it back around and lasso the idler and go in from underneath. And obviously doing the front side is much easier. And once that's tracking properly, I'm going to want to take the block and make sure it's in the notch. Oops. Looks like I may have tightened it a little too much, but it's just a little tight. But anyway, if it's too tight, you can always back it up just a little bit and let a little slack out of the block there, and then once you get the one in, then you can move the other one. Anyway, so I've got the cables installed on the carriage plate, and I've got the cables pretty tight. So one little trick that I like to do, I haven't even begun adjusting the tensioners yet, and I've got some pretty decent tension there. So what I like, that's just because the cable is going to be going slack on us the first couple prints, and we're going to want to have as much travel with our tensioners to take up that slack as possible. So this is what I like to do. How I do that, just get them taut before I even do anything. There's also going to be a little slack once we move the steppers around a little bit. They're going to relax a little bit from our wrap job, because we weren't able to obviously wrap them as tight as the machine is going to be able to. So here's the cable block. I just took it back off to show you what I do. So came unhooked on the spool or the idler. So I just want to lasso the idler again, make sure that that's tracking properly, and then I've got my anchor block here. So you want your cable to go like this, and then it goes into the notch like that. So it might be a little tight getting it up to the carriage plate. So what I like to do is I like to cheat a little bit by swinging it the one side in, and that can give me enough room to attach the first screw. Once I have that screw seated, then I can swing this in like that, and that actually pre-tightens the string. I want to make sure you're tracking on that notch still. This actually will put a preload on the string and keep from losing it when you take all the keep it from falling off your idlers. if and when it goes slack. So there, I've got everything installed, and I haven't even done anything with the tensioners yet, and we've got a little bit of tension there right now already, and that's good, because like I said, what's going to happen is the first couple prints, you're going to end up with the string is going to break in. It stretches a little bit. That's common. It's the break-in period for the cable, and it will eventually stop happening. So what you're going to want to have is maximum amount of travel with your tensioners in the back, and that's pretty much all that's for. Right? So by having the cable as tight as you can, basically at the end of the install, it's better. It's not that critical, but anyway, if you do everything just like we went over in the video, you'll see everything is kind of symmetric and nicely installed. We've got the cables crossing right in the middle. We haven't adjusted anything back here yet. The tensioners are evenly matched, and the cables are installed. And that again, the cables is the hardest part of installing these kits. So if you've made it this far, you're over the hump, and that's pretty much about it. So what I like to do is take the tag end and I trim it. Don't trim it close to the block. I want to leave it's not going to get in the way or hurt anything when you're printing. Just leave a little bit of slack on the end, so that if and when you say you run out of travel with your tensioners and you still got a slack string, what you can do is you can actually loosen up the anchor bolt here and take up some of that slack and then retighten it down. That gives you something to get a hold of to do that. So that's pretty much how you install the cables onto the carriage plate, with all the tricks that I know on how to do it. So now the next step is going to be undoing the clips off of our steppers and the carriage plates. We're going to remove the shims, and then kind of move the system around a little bit, and let the string kind of relax and adjust to the configuration it's in, and watch how it tracks up and down on the steppers. So that's what we're going to do next. Alright, so I've got my cables installed, and I've got them trimmed, and you can see here I've left about an inch or an inch and a half or so on all of the ends. They're not going to get in the way of anything during your print. Don't worry about leaving a little extra slack there. It's just there obviously to get a hold of something. Gives you something to get a hold of if you ever need to pull some slack out of your cable. If your tensioners are maxed out and you're still going slack, you're going to need to loosen up your anchor block on the cable and pull up some slack. So that's why I leave some slack there. So now what I'm going to be doing here next is just remove the tape from the steppers. Let's get this off of here. Slip that out of the way. Alright, so I got my tape off, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull the clips off. And hang on to these in case you need to do another install for cable. So there, now I've got the clips off. I'm going to go ahead and remove the shims from all of the carriage plates. Just a little bit of silicone tubing. Got that all. Pull these out. There. So
now the whole system is all set up. The motion system is active, basically. So we're going to move it around a little bit and just kind of keep an eye on everything. The cable is going to go slack, especially right at first, and that's when we're going to start moving the tensioners out to compensate for the slack. So I just moved that over, and I'm going to go ahead and move the other one out. I want to try to move them equally. A little tricky to get in there, but there. So you want to have the strings about, you just start hearing a note. And again, we're just kind of moving things around right now to get cables tracking properly on the spools, and just kind of move it around a little bit so that things can self-adjust and self-align. And then you'll notice that the cables will start to slacken on you a little bit. And as that happens, you're just going to want to keep bringing these tensioners out. And you don't have to be too afraid to get them a little tight at first. And once you pull slack out, and you're going to want to move everything around again, corner to corner. Just keep going around and around, and that's going to basically introduce the adjustment that you made. It's going to relax the cable onto everything, basically mainly the spools here. So what you're going to want to check once the cable is all done, one of the first things you're going to want to do is check right up by where the spool is. So with your carriage in the middle, with your gantry and the carriage in the middle, you want your cable tracking in the middle of your extrusions. So it's looking pretty good. That's what you want. You want the cable in the middle of the extrusions. So that way, when it moves over to one side, there's cable walk. And you'll see the cable goes higher when you go to one side. You can see how it goes up and down just by moving this back and forth. You want that cable to track in between the extrusion. So now I'm in the back right corner. You can see it's at the lowest point there. Now I'm going to come to the front left corner, and the cable goes up. So you need to make sure that that cable throughout its motion is not rubbing on the extrusion itself. So it'll get close, but that's fine. Close is fine. You just don't want it touching anything, or it will abrade at the cable and it will break. So the last thing you want to deal with, you want to check this side too. You can actually, now that we've got these new stepper brackets, you can actually see the other side too. So I'm in the front right corner. This is never going to be this far up, but you can see I'm not touching anywhere. I'm going to go to the other side. I kind of got a little lucky. It's touching just a hair there. So I'm going to have to raise this right spool up just a little bit. But I'm in the farthest extreme of the machine here. This is not within the printing area. So normally you would probably be more like over about here would be the maximum printing area. And I'm close, but I'm not quite touching. So there. that's what you want to check. Want to check everything up near here, because wherever the cable rubs, you're going to have a break eventually. And if you just stay tuned to that, you want to just check that out and make sure you're not rubbing. And you can see how the cable goes all the way down around the idler in the back there. Just look at everything real good and make sure you're tracking on your spools, or keep saying spools, your idlers, especially the rear ones. Those are hard to see. So make sure you're tracking on your spool. Oh God, keep saying spool. On your idlers. Make sure you're tracking on your idlers properly. On both sides in the rear. You wanna just double check, triple check, and it's absolutely critical that nothing is rubbing during its motion as you move the carriage around the machine. So once that all checks out, and you've got some decent tension here on the string, again, it's gonna go slack on you a couple times. So you're just going to want to keep moving your tensioners out as that happens, and it'll eventually stop. And again, if you run out of travel with your tensioners, you can take up some slack. You'll want to, before you do that, you can bring your tensioners back in and then take up the slack at your tag end there by loosening the blocks and just pulling out some slack. So anyway, that's the hardest part of it right there, is getting that part done. So the rest is basically just attaching the drag chain, the limit switch on the X carriage. That's this one here. This is this bracket. It's really simple. And then just the IR board goes on the back there, and then we're going to be attaching the drag chain, and that's it. And if you've wired up, if you've done new steppers, the 0.9 degree, we're going to have to do the wiring on that. If you didn't, then you're pretty much ready to go, ready to assemble and start printing. Alright, so now I'm just going to install the limit switch for the X-axis. So this is how that goes on there. Don't mind the noise in the background. Those are prints separating from the print bed there. But anyway, this is how you attach the limit switch to the bracket. So you want the, there's a curved shape. You want that going up like this. And then that goes like that. It's to give it room for the wheel. You don't want it the other way. So it actually has M2 screws, so it actually physically can't install that way. You want the limit switch going this direction. So basically all you do is, once you're there, get one of your screws in there, and then you can simply kind of bring it in like that. Just get it snug, and then go on in there with the second screw. Kind of get it out of the way of the cross member here. And two screws hold that bracket on, and back it up and crank it down a little bit, and then there. That's all there is to attaching the limit switch for the X. Alright, so now what I'm doing is installing the drag chain. Basically just going to undo the process on that, the reverse of what it was when I took it off. So the first thing I'm going to do is attach it to the back side here, and then the carriage plate. So we got 2 screws that attach it to that. So and I've got the drag chain right here. So I'm just gonna get it up here kind of like this and just lay it over the gantry right now. And I'm not going to be too worried about that side just yet. So I'm gonna fish these cables in behind. Get the bracket in there. And you gotta fish the cables around. I want to go around behind the stepper like that. And then I've got my stepper cable coming down here. I'm going to be wiring that up later. Just trying to get the drag chain installed right now. I've got my screw, and then I've got my. So I'm just going to go on in like that, and then line that up with the drag chain. And that goes in. Got one. Going with the other. There that goes. I don't have to go crazy tight with that either. Kind of get it snug and then go about 1/8 of a turn past that. So now the drag chain is attached to the machine again. And now I've got to attach the drag chain bracket to the carriage plate bracket. So now what I'm going to be doing is basically take out these 4 screws. So you want to make sure you don't lose them. There's washers on there. You want to not lose those, backing those out. Just back those out. All of them out. Don't lose your washers. I dropped one. So got that. Alright, and then one more. Back that guy out. Okay, so now I'm ready to attach it. Just don't worry about the cables yet, just kind of get them out of the way. It helps to move the carriage over to the one side so you can get the drag chain kind of out of the way a little bit, and then you just get on it with your hex here. Just kind of fish it on in through the hole, and then get your first one in. You get one in, then you get the opposite corner in for alignment. I need to raise it a little bit just to get it aligned, and should thread in there. I'm not going real tight yet. In the lower left side, it should go in pretty easily. And then the last one, upper right, that's the most obstructed one by the drag chain itself. So that's why I like to do that one last. Just kind of get the drag chain, just kind of move it out of the way a little bit. Back the screw out a little bit so that it's tracking in the threads properly, not going in crooked. And then you kind of just don't want to go too crazy tight. Again, just snug, and then an 1/8 turn past that is just fine.
So that's why I'm tightening up the others now.
Alright, so there. Now the drag chain is on. Alright, so now I've got the IR board here. I've got my M3 screws already in it. So there, when they get the kit, they actually come installed on the carriage plate. So you just undo those, and I recommend threading them through the board first. You could actually put this on before the drag chain, it doesn't really matter. Just coming in from the back side of it, getting my wrench on, and I'm just coming in from the back again, like I said, and then kind of do both sides evenly. Tighten one side a little, then tighten the other. Just kind of oscillate back and forth like that. And probably can't even see what I'm doing. Yeah, oh, there you can kind of see the board down there, but anyway, that's how that's on there. That little bracket underneath is what this is for, the IR board. So if you have an F410, you're not going to have this part, but that's how that goes. You just got that board there. So now what I'm doing here is I'm just going to attach the limit switch. So that's just these two wires there. Top and bottom, doesn't matter what color goes where. Just one goes on one pin and then the other goes on the other. So I'm attaching the IR board cable. And again, you're not going to need to worry about this if you have the F410. But basically what I'm doing is, you can see I've got the cable kind of routed down, and I've got a zip tie that goes in between the little plastic part back here, and I've got the cable going through that. I've got my tag ends of the cable out of the way, and you pretty much just, you know, slide that in there, and you know, slide your, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble holding the camera. So this is all I'm doing here. I'm just kind of cinching it down. Don't have to go like real tight with it, but it's just to hold the cable in place there, and then it attaches on the IR board. So there's the 3 pins. Let me plug it in, and then you can see just how it plugs in underneath there and goes up the back of that bracket. So you just want to make sure when you get it installed that the cable is not rubbing on the extrusion, and then that zip tie will help keep it taut. You don't have to go crazy with it again. It's just holding the cable in place there, that's all. Alright, so now what I'm doing is I'm assembling the Hotend. I just take the Bowden tube. I'm going to lace that back through again, the slot on the machine. So that's going to come back in just like that. Now I've got my Bowden tube ready to go there, and then I've got my groove mount bracket here, and that goes underneath like this,
and then we're just going to be going straight up into this like that. So what I'm going to do is get the Bowden tube positioned, and then there's a hex screw that locates in there as well. So I'm going to be coming in.
It's gonna be a little bit tricky, but I'm just gonna come in like that. And I got my, oops, wrong one. This one here, and then that's gonna come down from the top. Start threading that in. Kind of want to do one side a little bit, and then do the other side a little. Just keep on going, back and forth. You'll feel it start to get a little tighter. Just keep going. You'll feel the hot end get snug. And kind of locate it. Position the heater block so it's nice and straight. You want parallel with the extrusion, and then you can kind of tighten it down a little bit there, a little bit more. Don't go crazy tightening this again either. We'll leave that like that, and now the hot end and the Bowden tube are installed, and now I've just got to connect. So I just got this connector here for the fan, and then I've got the other connectors for the heater block, the thermistor, and then I've got to attach the fan. So, alright, so I've got the hot end and the layer cooling fan all installed, and everything is pretty much ready to go there. I've got all the wires I've gone over and make sure none of them are going to rub on the extrusion. You really want to make sure that nothing is rubbing on the extrusion rail, or it can mess up the print, or even worse, you can wear through the insulation and ground out on the metal. So just want to make sure that, again, nothing is rubbing. So that's just about it for the install for the upgrade kit. And at this point, what you would probably do after this is move on to the calibration procedures, getting your steps per millimeter dialed in, and then also you can check your squareness. Basically what we do with that is we've got a square like this that we cut the corner off, and then you basically take it and you put it on your machine like this and check basically all four corners, just to make sure you're square. I've got videos for all this stuff. And then so the squaring is basically the screw on the back of the tensioner. There's the ones with the slot. By moving one out, it changes it makes the gantry rotate one way or the other. So basically the right side, pushing that out will cause the gantry to rotate clockwise looking down on it. And then if you move the left slot out, that will cause the gantry to rotate counterclockwise. So that's looking down on it from the top. And what you want to achieve is basically perfect perpendicularity between the y-axis and the gantry. You want the gantry to be perfectly perpendicular. So that's all part of the calibration process. But as far as the install goes, that's pretty much it for the upgrade kit. So if you did upgrade your steppers to the 0.9 degree, so that's right there. I've got the wires here, and at this point I will be moving on to soldering a connector onto the end here so that I can attach it to where the original cable was attached and feed that into Duet. Going to be doing that on both sides.
basically just splicing in where the other stepper was attached, and then I'll be ready to fire up the machine and go into Duet, and I'm going to be doubling my steps per millimeter because we have double the steps per revolution. So a normal stepper motor is about, I think it's 200, yeah, it's 200 steps per revolution. So these are essentially double that, 400 steps per revolution, and they obviously what they have is double the resolution. So we're going to need to double our steps per millimeter in Duet for these to function properly. I've already got the bed tabs installed, so those are pretty self-explanatory. You kind of see the bed tabs down here, the metal ones. Those are the 4 little blocks that come with the kit. So that's basically the way those install. It's just like that. They replace the 3D printed ones, so that way you don't have metal or plastic on top of your print bed and having it melt and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, that's pretty much the install of the kit, and now I'm going to be moving on to soldering the steppers. Alright, so I just got done soldering up the connector for the 0.9 degree stepper. These connectors are, this is what they are right here, and just using the 6-pin female, and then the original harness will attach straight up to this. So basically what they're doing is there's only 4 wires, but they're using the 6-pin. So the two, you've got blue, they skip one, and they got red, green, skip another, and then black. So that's how that goes. And then let me connect it real quick and I'll show you which color goes where according to the other wire. So just plugging it in now. So that's how it connects, just like that. You got blue to green, red to white, green to red, and then black to black. That's how that connects on both sides. If you're planning on soldering, there are steppers that you can get that have the same connector as the originals, but these are Stepper Online steppers. They're cheap on Amazon. They're only like 25 bucks or something. So that's how I connect them together. Then I've got some heat shrink. I'll slide that over the end of the connector and shrink wrap it down on both sides. And then I'm going to pull out the slack and re-zip tie things down, and then I'll be ready to fire up the machine. So that's how I do the 0.9 degree steppers. So this is where you would go to adjust your steps per millimeter. So you just boot up and log into Duet. Logged into my F400 printer here, and I'm going into system editor, and then what I want is config.g. Open that up, and then you can find your steps per millimeter right here. That's this line right there, and you want to double your Y and your X. Basically just these two right there. Should be like 43 something or whatever. You can type in those numbers right there if you want to start out. So that's what you do to adjust the config file for the 0.9 degree steppers. And so I recommend just going ahead and whatever that number is, just double it, and then proceed to doing your steps per millimeter calibration. That's another video, and just make sure that the numbers are the same. So all you have to do is check your X steps per millimeter. So using the ruler, you want to check the travels, and whatever that number ends up being, you're going to duplicate that for the Y. Those numbers should be the same. You don't have to do both of the X and the Y, because both steppers are actually involved in moving in either axis. So that's basically what you want to do when you first turn your machine on, is go into Duet. Don't even bother trying to home it. Just go into Duet, open up your config file, and double your steps per millimeter on your X and Y right there. Alright, so I'm all done with the upgrade process on the F400 here. As you can see, I'm already printing. I've got everything installed and calibrated, and you can kind of see how everything is working out here. So I've got the carbon fiber build plate installed, which allows me to use the same G code that the F410 uses. So what's nice is all I have to do is use my slicer to create one set of G codes for all of my printers now, and it just skips over the bed probing, auto bed leveling thing. All of that has been omitted, and it just starts up the print just like the F410 that's modded over here going over there. So it's essentially the same exact setup now, and except I've got the version 2 stepper brackets. You can see how they're working just fine, working great. Really like those stepper brackets. The install was a lot easier, and I've got real good access to the spools, and I can really see what's going on with the cable. And yeah, so got the 0.9 degree steppers all routed with the cables. I just cleaned this thing, and I already got filament down there. Anyway, so yeah, there it is, fully upgraded with all of the mods, and very, very happy with how this setup is working. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, that's first print going down right now. And one thing I wanted to point out one last time is, once you get your kit installed and you've begun printing, you're going to want to keep an eye on the wheels. All of the wheels, especially the X carriage. You want to be paying attention for the eccentrics. You want to take time to get those swung in just right, so that there's not too much pressure on your wheels. If you're finding that you're wearing grooves in your wheels, then your eccentrics have been too tight and you needed to loosen them up. So if your eccentrics are too tight, the wheels will start to wear out. So be mindful of that. You want to check all 12 wheels. So there's 4 on the X carriage, 4 on the Y carriage on the right, 4 on the other carriage on the left. You want to check top, bottom, every single wheel. You want to pay attention to them. And if you've got, if they're wearing out, then you're going to need to swing the eccentric out so that there's not so much friction. And pay attention to everything, the cables. You just want to kind of check everything over. If you're starting to notice frays somewhere, if you've got frays in your cable anywhere, that means you're rubbing somewhere. These cables will not start fraying on their own unless you're rubbing. The most common place to rub is on the back extrusion, the back of the extrusions. So again, and also up near the stepper brackets. So you want to, again, make absolutely sure that no cables are rubbing anywhere. Just monitor everything closely the first few prints, and as you print, the cables will get tighter, and then when the printer cools down, the cables will go slack on you a few times. That's normal for them to be tight during a print and then looser after the print. You just want to keep taking up the slack with the tensioners in the back, moving them out, and that's pretty much about it. As long as you've covered all those bases, you should be up and running for a real good long time, and not have to worry about this printer for a long time. I have not seen one of these cables break under normal use yet. The only time I've seen or heard of them break is when they are rubbing and not installed properly, and then they break. So that's pretty much all there is to it. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, feel free to shoot me a message. That's going to conclude the one last thing actually is there's the F410. There's a newer model that has the cross brace in the back, and then it's got the extra thick stepper brackets. So they must have beefed those up to accommodate for the flimsy standard ones starting to fail. So normally we'd put a spacer instead of the dampener, so they can't fit a damper on those because it's too thick. So you can either use a spacer that I provide with these stepper brackets, or you can use a dampener. I do recommend the dampeners because they help with the noise, and they also help with the ringing, so the printer won't, the quality is actually a little better with those on. I have tested that. So then that's pretty much the only other thing that's different. So anyway, yeah, so this is the first print, and I'm just gonna run it on through and check everything closely, all the wheels before each print. And that's about it, guys. So yeah, again, just let me know if you have any other questions. All right, take care.